Hello, everybody. March of 2017, and you are listening for linkmeup podcast number 49. And here it is, disclaimer. This is our first show in English. Don't put blame on us. We will do our best or nothing to not bore you and not cause blood from your eyes. Full podcast will be in English. On 25th of March, we will publish original track in English as well, but also we will prepare version with synchronous Russian subtitles. As for real-time Telegram chat, you are free to ask questions either in Russian or English. Natasha will track it and voice it here. So, today we are going to talk about the most famous network simulator in the world, GNS3. This month, GNS released version 2.0, and we have a good reason to invite here full-time developer of this app, Julien Duponchelle. Hello, Julien. Nice to meet you.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
We are very glad to see and hear you here. And first of all, let me say thank you and whole GNS team on behalf of Russian telecom society, Russian telecom community. I don't know the person around me who have not heard about it. I mean, engineers. You make a really big deal, so thank you. And can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, I'm Julien Duponchelle. I'm a French engineer. I live in Paris. I've worked for multiple startups before working for GNS3.
So when did you join it?
I joined GNS3 2 years ago. I was in school with Jeremy, and 2 years ago he asked me, "Do you want to join me?" And I jumped on the project, and it was cool since that.
Was this decision hard for you, or you was very glad to join?
I was very, very glad to join. It was a very good time because they just made the crowdfunding. If we take the GNS3 history, Jeremy Grossman, the creator of GNS3, started the project as a school project because he was a teacher assistant for Cisco stuff, and he wanted a virtual environment in order to experiment more easily because the school was providing us a lot of hardware gears, but it was enough for Jeremy. And then 3 years ago, I think, they started a crowdfunding campaign, which has been a very, very huge success. And they decided to hire me to work on the project full time.
Okay, so before we start with GNS theory or 2.0 release, let's spend some time to GNS history. So if you know, can you share for us some milestones of GNS? How did it appear and grew up from simple GUI for dynamics to current state? So now you already told that it appeared as a just school project. What was the next?
Yeah, the first thing was at the beginning, GNS3 was not front end for Dynamics. Jeremy wanted to make a front end for NS3. But he discovers that Dynamics exists, and he says, "Oh, it's awesome! We can, unlike Packet Tracer, we can not simulate. We can run the real operating system." It was a very, very big deal at this time. If you remember, at this time, your CPU don't even have virtualization instruction. Virtualization was something crazy, consuming a lot of resources, and Dynamics was so light, so fast at this time compared to the other solution. After that, he started to add the QEMU support in order to have ASA 8. It was crazy at this time. People extracting image from their Cisco hardware in order ASA to run inside GNS3. And also, he support this time VirtualBox. They even push patch in QEMU and VirtualBox in order to work with GNS3.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to introduce some our guests. So because of this podcast is maybe will be listened in not only in Russia, I will introduce all our guys here just for a couple of minutes, and then we can continue with the GNS. So here is me as a creator, as a host of this podcast, Marat. Here is also Max. He is our main technical guy of this podcast, organizing everything here. Hi, Max.
Hi, guys.
Natasha, the only girl in our company.
Hello.
Yeah, so Alex, say some words about you.
I don't know really what to say about myself. I just thinking that I already have a question for Julien. I wanted to ask him about can he describe his role in GNS development process more deeply, but I think let's set this question to pause and please introduce another guys.
Yeah, and here is Dmitry. So Dmitry is our guest today, so I want to give a couple of minutes to you to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, this is Dmitry Figol. I'm customer support engineer in one of the biggest networking vendors. Obviously, huge fan of GNS3, and I am usually trying to defend GNS3 in any argument. So probably that's the reason why I'm here today.
All our listeners know you and know that feature of you.
Yeah, it's very easy to start a flame war or something. You could just say that another networking simulator is better, and this is where I come.
Yeah, so in Russia we have some Telegram chats about telecom, about some vendors and so on. And if if word GNS appear in some of this chat, you can find Dima there as well. And so now we continue with GNS. Sorry for this break. So let's start from some question which was asked by Alex. What's your role and position in GNS now?
Yeah, GNS3 is a very, very small team. We are 3 people working full-time on it, 2 developers, and Jeremy Grossman and me, and 1 business developer, which is Mark Blackwell. Is business developer slash making all the paper stuff for us. Jeremy and me work on all part of the software. We don't have a specific area where we are working. I make more support than Jeremy because Jeremy know more deeply the stuff. I keep for him some complicated task like debugging VLAN packet lost or stuff like that. And I try to make good relation with the community on Twitter with podcasts like that. I try to answer to all the mail we received, and I try also to make easy for new developers or new contributors to contribute to the project.
So as a employee of GNS, you are responsible for almost everything there.
Yeah, work on everything.
Oh my God! So indeed, only 3 people are making GNS now.
Yeah, it's 3 people full time, but we have a huge community, and it's a very, very important part. Sometimes people from the community will take 2 days full of the other time to try to isolate a bug, and we can jump on the bug report and fix the few lines with the problem. We also have people we have not speak about the 1.x version for the moment, but in the 1.x series, we have introduced a feature which is a GNS3 appliance. They are JSON file describing how an appliance could be imported into GNS3. And we have people in the community which takes their time to test appliance from different vendors and writing the configuration required for GNS3.
So how many other people who is only partly a time developer GNS has?
We don't have, on the developer side, we don't have a lot of developers. We have 3 or 4 people which contribute code sometimes, but we don't have a lot of developers. We have more people working on documentation, debugging, quality assurance. For example, on the quality assurance, I think we have 20 people very, very active, which test every release we make. They even take the nightly build and test them and make the bug reports. But on development, we don't have a lot of people. And I think it's normal because most of GNS3 users are network engineers, and they don't have a deep background in code. And the developer which can help us don't have necessarily the deep background in networking. It's hard to find someone which can contribute to GNS3. But we hope in the future to make stuff much easier to contribute.
So, do you pay some money for them? I am not sure. Is it a proper question for you? If you can't answer, please don't.
We don't pay contributors. It's an open source project. People contribute on their own. The contributors which often contribute to the project generally get better support. When they ask us something by mail, we try to answer them more faster. We try to, when they need. If you contribute often to GNS3, even with bug reports, we know if at the end we know each other, and when you ask something to us, we will more involved to add the feature missing for you. On some we try to help people with some license missing for them or stuff like that, but we don't pay contributors.
Okay, got it. So despite GNS has 3 full-time developer, you have maybe about 100 people who contribute to GNS, yes? Am I right?
Yeah. The support is mainly done by volunteers.
Recently, I saw that there is a YouTube channel and there is a so-called GNS3 Talks, David Bombal. So could you tell us more about this YouTube channel? Is it with cooperation with you guys, or this is like individual contributor?
Yeah, David. Something the people ask for him, for us a lot in the past years was they say the documentation on GNS3 was not existing or was bad quality. That's why we have started to work closer with David Bombal, which is a teacher, an instructor, professional instructor, which have helped us to make the new documentation website. You can see on the produce video to help users to enter into GNS3. And on this topic, we have a special relation with David. He published. There is another side of GNS3. It's the Academy, GNS3 Academy, which is a website where instructor can publish courses, and people will buy these courses. It's on a lot of topics: software-defined networking or GNS3 itself. And we work with David close in order to have a good quality video. To have produce official content to help the users. You can consider David it's a half-time member. It's a part-time member of the GNS3 team. He worked a lot for us.
So you made very big deal by developing a graphical interface for Dynamis from the very beginning, and so it looks like you are doing it just for fun. So, but the main question, the very popular question of our engineers here in Russia: how do GNS make money? How can it pay for everything?
But the first during 7 years, Jeremy has worked for free. He never made a penny from GNS3.
What did
the community? He wants to offer to the network engineers the best tool, and it was his mission, just a mission. After that, when the IOU start to be available, which provide new images for iOS on a switch, good quality switch images. Jeremy has looked at that and think, okay, I need a few months full time to be able to integrate this. I can't do this in my free time. It's not possible. That's why he asked for some money via a crowdfunding campaign. And the campaign was a huge success. That's why he decided to create a company to try to keep the GNS3 development full time. The company got two sources of revenues. The first sources was advertising. If you remember 1 year ago, I think you have advertising inside the application. And it was working well because it's heavily target. If you want to touch network engineer, you don't have a lot of advertising possibility. And the second sources of revenues at this time was the GNS3 Academy. At this time, GNS3 took a small part of every courses sell on the Academy. And because we have a huge community, we can make huge communication and sell a lot of courses. And now it was 2 years ago, I think, SolarWinds, which is has decided to be a kind of sponsors for us, and they pay everything in exchange to put their brand in front of our users, and also we collaborate with our internal team to improve GNS3 for their usage. SolarWinds, for people who don't know what is this company, they make NPM, which is a monitoring software, mainly for Windows environment. And they use GNS3 to simulate the environment they want to monitor. It allows them to make a huge economy before they need to have a big lab of rack of 10 Cisco device, for example, and now they can replace them with virtual stuff. And it's a win-win deal. Now we don't no longer need to worry about the money. They just take care of that, and we can focus on making GNS3 better and better for everyone.
Just to clarify, is currently GNS3 team and company part of SolarWinds, or you are still two independent organizations?
Technically, we are part of SolarWinds, but we are independent. We don't have a lot of relation. But if you go to the SolarWinds website on the product section, we'll find GNS3.
And was there in history of GNS some moment when the development was in crisis, when it can stop and we lost GNS for society, or always everything was quite okay?
Everything was quite okay. Jeremy has continued to develop it since the beginning. It was never been a real issue, but I think without starting a company, starting full funding, I think it will have been complicated to follow the recent evolution on the front of. You have software-defined networking, which just appear which require to be able to emulate a large number of new devices. You have people playing with stuff like Ansible or things like that. 10 years ago, when Jeremy started GNS3, was just the networking world was mostly Cisco or little Juniper. But if you support that, you support everything you need. But stuff have changed since, and without funding, it would have been hard to make the required evolution to GNS3.
And now, which vendors and which functions, like you said, Ansible, SDN, GNS can support?
Sorry?
So it started from Cisco emulator, simulator, and now which other vendors can GNS support?
We support a lot of stuff. If the hardware maker provide an images that can run inside a QEMU or VMware or VirtualBox, we can run it. You can run Alcatel, MikroTik, Juniper, Cisco, Brocade, Cumulus Linux, Arista. It's all the new vendors are coming in the networking world often provide virtual images. It's not a problem. It's more complicated with the old guy like Cisco, which is not really cooperative with us or with their customer. We support most vendor Dell also. We can on the GNS3 website you have a marketplace section where you can find all the appliances known as supported. I know also we have vendors. I know big vendors which don't want us to tell his name, developing new operating system version inside GNS3. They test their new software-defined networking stuff, and they use GNS3 for that internally.
Can you give some examples how SDN can be used on GNS? Sounds very interesting.
The first thing we support. We have an image for Open vSwitch. Since GNS3 1.5, we have a support for running Docker container inside the topology. This means you can easily spawn a program like Open vSwitch inside your topology, and you can connect to it an SDN controller. Like for example, David was speaking with me this week. He was testing Open Daylight, the Open Daylight SDN controller inside GNS3. On using Open vSwitch as switches for his SDN networking. He was also testing some HP. I think he was testing the HP controller on the Cisco application also. It's nice because because GNS3 is really agnostic of the vendor, you can easily replace a part and start a new program from a different vendor in order to compare the different solutions.
Now that we are talking about vendors, do you have any cooperation with vendors? Has it happened that some networking vendor comes to you and says, "Okay, we want to work with you in order to be able to run this software in GNS3"?
I think in the past we have made something with Cumulus. If I correctly remember, we have helped them to publish documentation on their website. Often we don't have official relation with the vendors. It's often the engineers that contact us and we speak directly engineer to engineer. It's more easy, more speed. Often is that it's just the engineers which come to us and speak and make the bridge inside the company.
Okay. You also mentioned Docker. So for those our listeners who don't know what Docker is, could you briefly describe what it is and how it fits into GNS3 and what you can do with it?
Docker is a Linux container technology which allows you to run program. It's unlike virtualization. You will not spawn a new kernel. You will use the kernel of your computer. This means it's much more lighter than spawning a full virtual machine. The downside is you can't run a Linux application on a Windows, for example. You need to run it on a Linux kernel. The integration inside GNS3 is special. I have worked with some Docker engineer to make it fit correctly inside GNS3. At GNS3, we consider the container as like a very light virtual machine. It's not the correct way to use a container in production, but for your use case, it's perfect. For example, you can spawn a Debian where you will be able to use apt-get and install any tool you need. On the memory footprint will be just the bash session you will have start inside the container. It's very, very nice if you want to make big topology. It's a perfect technology. Also, if you want to spawn inside the topology, for example, a mail server, and you just in the past you need to start a QEMU with a full operating system and install the mail server on it. With Docker, you can just spawn the container that will start the mail server, and after that, you can play with the mail server. For example, if you want to configure a firewall and see how the firewall can filter your email, it's a good technology to test, to have a light solution to test to simulate a computer. But on the Docker side, we are using all the Docker provide a registry, which is a place where you can send images and share them with the world. We use that part of Docker, but we don't use our networking stuff. We do our own networking. That means your container can have 10 or 12 network interface, when in Docker, in standard, you should have one interface because they will manage all the network for you.
Let's talk briefly about GNS3 milestones throughout its history, right? So, just in a couple of words, I mean, what is to release associated with which features, right? Starting from the 0 point something.
But
we can follow evolution of GNS3, and because some people still think that GNS3, the only thing you can run Dynamics routers, right? Which is simply not true today, right?
Yeah, I don't know a lot the history before 1.0. It was the old classic series of GNS3 0, especially 0.8.7. The 1.0 was the first release made after the crowdfunding. This release bring the IOU stuff, which for people who don't know what is IOU, it's iOS on Unix. It's a version of iOS compiled as a Linux program by Cisco. Sadly, they never released something stable for the moment. We are still waiting something in VIRL, but it's not released. The 1.x series has continued to 1.3 version. The 1.3 version was the first really stable version of the 1.3 series. In 1.4, we have added support to VMware VM. You have collaborate with VMware in order to support VMware VM inside your GNS3 topology. You can connect your Cisco switch to a VMware VM running, for example, Xavier, Windows, anything. And the 1.5 has bring the Docker support. And we are working now on the 2.0 series.
Let's talk about 2.0. What does it bring?
Yeah, the 2.0 is a major new version of GNS3. We have worked since 1.0 to move from the model where you have a single desktop application where everything runs in your computer. In 2.0, you have a real client-server architecture. Where you have the graphical interface running on your computer, and you can have the emulator running on your computer or as another computer. This computer could be on a cloud provider, could be on a big machine in your office, and you can collaborate on a project. If you connect two GNS3 clients to this project, you will see each other changes. You can see the console from each other's from each users. You can interact. We also offer a clean API to manipulate GNS3. You can make a program that will be control your GNS3 project, that will spawn new node, move node, do everything you want inside the topology. And we think that offering it's a REST API with JSON, and we provide real-time notification with WebSocket. And we think on providing this API, providing an easy way for people to manipulate GNS3 will offer a lot of new usage. You can imagine a teacher which will create his topology with GNS3 with the guy interface, and we just offer to his students a web interface where they will see each node of the topology, and they can just click to start a node on stop node, for example. We also bring a portable project. We have started this with 1.5, but it's done in 2.0. This means you can take a project in GNS3, export it, and re-import it on any computer, and it will work. You can choose if you want to export the images required by the project, but you can take a program, a topology on Windows, and export it and import it on your Mac, on a remote server, or whatever you want. We also have changed how we save the topology. Now, when you modify something, it's saved. The topology is saved in real time. It's avoid you to lost stuff because you forget to save, or having trouble because you have not saved, you have killed the application, and you have sync problem between the VMware VM, for example, on the topology. And you no longer need to worry about implementation detail of GNS3. It's a little bit complicated, but in the 1.x and 0.8 series, you have stuff you can't do on some node. For example, you can't capture something between two VPCS node. It was not implemented. Now you can capture on any link. All the link can be hot link. It was not the case in the past with QEMU, for example. If you want, you can split your GNS3 installation with multiple servers. You can have a server running on a big computer and one server running on your local laptop. And the node, for example, if you have an ASA-V connected running on your remote server, it can speak with your local network interface. You no longer need to tricks in order to make this working. It will be much more easier to use because you have less stuff, weird stuff about the implementation of GNS3.
Okay, now that you mentioned a lot of different stuff, I have a couple of questions of them. So there is this concept of GNS3 VM. Are you also, say, focused in 2.0 release that everything should be done with GNS3 VM, so it should be defined first, or it is not required?
No, it's not required. The GNS3 VM is something. It's basically an Ubuntu where we install the GNS3 server by default. Why we need that? The problem is today most of the manufacturers make QEMU image for Linux. They have bug on the QEMU version for Windows. On the QEMU version for Windows, can't use the CPU, the acceleration instruction for virtualization of your CPU. That's why it can be it sounds a little crazy when you look at it first, but if you run a QEMU VM inside a VMware VM, your QEMU VM will be able to access to the hardware virtualization until it will be faster than running the QEMU on your Windows computer. But if you are a Linux user, you can just skip the GNS3 VM part and you install everything on your computer and run it directly. It will be much faster. In the 2.0, it's easy for you to just install the server on the Linux box and just use the client to interact with it from your Windows, from your Mac. We are multi-platform.
Just to clarify, when we're talking about the projects in 2.0, so where are the files really stored? So are they stored on the server? Are they stored on the client? If it's mixed of both, what is stored where?
Yeah, it was a downside of the 1.0 and later version. The file was stored always on the client. But in 2.0, the files are stored on the server. By default, when you use GNS3, you have a local server. This means the files are stored locally. But you can totally use GNS3 as a remote installation. And in this scenario, all the files are stored on the remote servers.
So now if let's say I use some remote server, right, and I can use just this remote server, I don't need to spawn local server, correct? And then if I want to transfer this project to, let's say, another server, what steps do I have to do?
If you want to transfer the project, you can just use export and import feature. You have in the files menu, you can export a portable project and re-import the project after.
With this feature, do I export everything, including the image, including the config and so on, or only some things?
When you export, you have a checkbox asking you if you want to export the image or not. We don't export the image by default for two reasons. The first, it will make the file much bigger. And the second reason, we want you to be sure that when you share a project, if you share a project on the internet, you probably don't want to include the image if the image have some copyright, and we just want to protect you. To avoid you to export a project and share it. I share Cisco images and don't have the right to share it. It's a problem.
Okay, so now that we are talking about copyrights, and I know that GNS3 team takes it seriously, and you do your best to, exclude any copyright infringement. But have you had any issues with vendors that they came to you and say, "Oh, we shouldn't do this, and we will sue you"?
No, we don't. We never have trouble about copyright. We try to do our best to avoid a problem. We don't want people to share images on our forum, and for example, now for years we have redirect people to the Cisco website. Now we say if you want an iOS image, you can just buy it on Viral and import it in GNS3. It's work and it respect the Cisco copyright. We try to push the most legal way possible. We don't want people to break copyright. We often ask people to, when they want an image, this image doesn't exist on the internet. They can't download it from the constructor website. We ask them to just contact the commercial support of the manufacturers in order to get access to the images.
Okay. Also for listeners that are not really aware how you would, let's say, import some kind of QEMU image in 2.0 or like 1.5. So could you briefly describe the process, even though you already touched appliances a little bit, but I think it would be really beneficial to hear it, let's say, once again, let's say more step by step, what do you have to do in order to import an image?
The best way to do it is to go to GNS3.com and go to the marketplace section or the documentation section. You will be able to download a file which is a .gns3 appliance for the appliance you want to emulate. For example, if we take Cumulus Linux, you just import this appliance file into GNS3. A wizard will appear, and this wizard will ask you to provide the required file for making this appliance to work. And if possible, we provide you the link to download the appliance. If it's a paid appliance, we provide you the link to the customer website of the manufacturers, where if you are a customer, you should be able to download the images. If the appliance is open source, we can also provide a direct link for downloading the required files. After that, you just follow the wizard, next, and if everything is fine, the appliance will appear into your GNS3. And the appliance file contains the correct configuration you need for the appliance. It will configure your QEMU with the correct architecture, with the correct options, the correct network card. We know that some appliances need a specific QEMU network card and require this amount of RAM, and we will help you on everything of this. And it will be very, very. If you have access to the correct image, it's very simple.
We don't need to send image manually using like FTP. We don't need to do any trial method on QEMU parameters to launch it and so on. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. And everyone can contribute. It's on your GitHub. You have a repository called GNS3 Registry, which contain all the configuration file available on the marketplace and the documentation, and everyone can make a new one extra. You still have the old method allowing you to make an appliance by hand. If the appliance is unknown, you will need to make this. But for the most common stuff, you can just follow the wizard.
You mentioned GNS3 registry, but unfortunately for most of the network engineers, I mean, not all of them know how to use GitHub and Git, right? Because it's mainly developers tool. Do you plan to include like specific page, right, where you can fill in the form, and then you like fill in the form with like link and QEMU parameters and whatever, right? So that you can get it. Somebody from your team can review it and approve it, and then it gets published to the registry, something like that. Do you have any plans to do it?
First, if you are not comfortable with Git, just send us the file by mail, and we will integrate it. We know that network engineer is not familiar for the moment with Git. I think it will change with stuff like Ansible. People will need to use more and more Git, but if you send us a mail or if you share the config on the forum, it's fine. We just integrate it. The time you take for making this appliance, it's a huge help for us. We'll not refuse something because you don't push it on Git or something like that. About making an interface, we have planned to make something more integrated in the future, but if someone wants to make a web application in JavaScript and to help users to do it, just do it and share it with the community. It will help us.
Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit more about architecture. So, at some point, I think it was like 1 year ago. So you published an interesting document about GNS 3.0 vision, and it included a lot of different stuff. One of those was GNS3 controller. So what I would like to know, if this is what you are using in 2.0, and if yes, could you please describe it to our listeners? What is GNS3 controller?
The architecture of GNS3 is we have a client which speaks with the controller using a REST API. It's a HTTP and JSON and WebSocket. The controller is the main server of GNS3. It will control multiple GNS3 server. You can have one server on your laptop, one server at the other side of the world, in the data center with a huge amount of resources. And the servers, GNS3 servers, will control the emulators. This architecture allows you to distribute the load. You can make. You don't have any limit in GNS3 about the number of nodes you can run. You don't have any artificial limit. If you can add more power to your GNS3 installation, you can take advantage of it. And after that, the emulator speak to each other via UDP tunnel. We don't use. I know that Viral or UnetLab use Linux bridges to speak from an emulator to another emulator. But GNS3 use UDP tunnel to do that. The main reason we have two reasons for doing that. The first reason is GNS3 is multi-platform. UDP tunnel work on any platform. GNS3 is multi-server. When using an UDP tunnel, we can speak from one node to another node on your local computer, and from one node on your local computer to a node on a remote computer. It works without trouble.
And does this approach have some limitation?
In theory, it could be a little slower than using bridges, because the bridges is made by the kernel. But another downside of using bridges is your kernel can impact the packet. I know that UnetLab, for example, apply a kernel patch to avoid some packet to be modified in the bridge. When you use UDP tunnel, you just have the packets output from an emulator and send the same to the other emulators. You have no modification possible.
Do I understand correctly that in 2.0 we have already 100% working distributed load? So I mean, if you have multiple servers, you can easily, let's say, I want to run 10 CSR devices there, and I want to run, I don't know, 5 Cumulus switches or VMs on that server and so on. Or it's still work in progress?
Yeah, it's working. The only problem you will have is you need to you will need to manually say, okay, I will create 2 Cumulus on this server, 2 Cumulus on this server, on load balance the load by yourself. We don't manage it for you. It's the only downside, but you can run a big topology without problem. Even with 1.x, you can do that. We have seen a user with 10 Raspberry Pi running a topology load balance on this.
Okay, so Marat, please go on.
I wanted to return to the architecture because I'm not so familiar with how GNS3 works indeed. So, am I understand right that, for example, if we are taking just some Tisco network, emulated, so 2 different devices uses UDP tunnel to communicate with each other?
Yeah.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, so now that you mentioned viral and UNL a little bit. So, could you? I mean, this is very, very popular, very hot topic, right? But could you please describe the difference between these three products? So, GNS3, viral, and UNL, or the new name of this project is EVNG.
Let's start Holy War, yeah.
Yeah. First, it's a very good thing that now we have UNetLab and Viral. It makes us the life much easier, especially Viral, because now you have a Cisco engineer which are responsible of making images working in virtual environment. It's nice. I hope they will not kill the product, but it's very good. Viral on UNetLab are made to work inside a VM or to be installed alone on a computer. They are Linux. It's a Linux distribution with everything installed on it. With the GNS3, you can install GNS3 on your Windows computer, on your Mac, on a Fedora, on a CentOS, on a Debian, on Ubuntu. You are free. UNetLab and Viral use a more control environment. It's good because they have more controls. They have less bug due to weird stuff installed on a user computer. For example, recently we have debugged a trouble because GNS3 was crashing when you are using a Dell computer with a specific version of a Dell Backup Manager. It was crazy. We lost a lot of time with that. It's the main difference is here. It's how they install on the system. Also, Viral on the new UNetLab EVNG use OpenStack as a base for managing the VM and stuff like that. I don't know if EVNG finalize the migration, but it was their plan. When GNS3 do it control everything by his own. We have an approach which is, we think, much lighter. It's because GNS3 is used by a big corporation with a lot of resources, like a government agency or stuff like that. But it's also used by students all around the world. And for them, the RAM, the CPU as something they don't have a lot. They need to have something light as much as possible, and we try to meet this requirement. I know we have users in area where they don't even have internet access. They have box installed by someone which brings the box from another city to explain to people how to use the Cisco stuff, and they will make all their courses with that. And when they have the diploma, they will work for telecom companies. It's the main difference is here. UNetLab have EVNG as a web interface. With 2.0, GNS3 provide a full API, and we think about making a web interface. We have plan for that. We don't have a date for that, but we want to provide also a web interface. Viral has a two interface. A web interface based on Netkit, I think. Netkit. I don't remember the exact name of the technology they use for the web interface, and desktop client using VM Mastro, which is a little weird, I think. It's based on Eclipse, and it's a modified version of Eclipse for managing a topology. It's the main differences are here. We have talked with the other team. We don't think us about being into a war. Cisco Viral is working on Cisco stuff. They don't have interest to make virtualization for non-Cisco gears. Oh, also we have a differences also is GNS3 try to have zero knowledge for new hardware. We try to have, for new appliances, we try to have zero knowledge of the operating system running inside the topology. This means we would just want to virtualize the hardware, and after that the OS do what he wants. We don't extract the configuration from the memory. We just dump the memory raw to the disk and we reload it. This has the advantage that we can more easily make stuff working inside GNS3. You can on a random user can add support for new appliances without touching a line of code of GNS3. The downside is it's more complicated if you want to manually edit a configuration from the outside of the appliance, because we just save the disk of the appliance.
Okay, so just to summarize, you mentioned that you have plans to implement the GUI. Is that correct?
Yeah, we want to have a web interface for GNS3. We don't think about making something ISO with the same feature as the current interface. We think more about something more simple, more accessible. If you want to have all the features of GNS3, you can use the desktop client. If you just want to manage your topology console to the device, you can use the web interface. What we think about today, but we don't have start the development. We have make some prototype to just test that the API is working. It's not we are not making crazy stuff, but we don't have start of the release the development of a web interface. For the moment, we are focused on making the foundation very, very stable and efficient.
You said that GUI is not the main focus right now. In general, let's say when we could expect it in 2.2, 2.3, or 3.0.
The 2.0 release should be available at the end of the month. We will follow with 2.1 release with some missing stuff we think are missing. Do we want to better integrate the appliances you can find on the website, and we want to directly integrate it inside the application. We want also to make it easier to connect your computer to the topology. And after we have done that, we'll probably work on this interface. But we are still thinking about that, how we make that. We discuss that internally to see what is the best plan. But we have all the requirements are in place. If someone outside GNS3 want to start a web interface, it's totally possible, and we will support them and help them to do it.
Julien, and before I caught that current version of Viral uses OpenStack to manage images, manage virtual machines, right?
Yeah, they use OpenStack as their foundation, which is, I think it's when they decided they have started the development of Viral. It was smart from them because OpenStack provide a lot of stuff pre-made, but I think at the end OpenStack will not offer them the flexibility you want from a networking virtualization lab, because the OpenStack is made for making production infrastructure. For example, they don't need to have a feature like injecting fault inside a link or packet loss. It's a nonsense for production infrastructure. But in GNS3, we want to add this in the future to be able to click on a link and say, okay, you have 30% of packet lost on this link.
Interesting.
Yes, sounds very interesting. That's why I raised this question. So in GNS3, do you use just some scripts to run instances and manage virtual machines?
Yeah, it's our code which just spawn a QEMU process on the or VMware and stuff like that. We just call the binary and spawn the VM, and after that we say to the binary, okay, make this UDP tunnel from that point to that point. We even contribute in the past the UDP tunnel support to QEMU and VirtualBox, yeah.
And it works perfectly well. I never met some problem with this. And but according to the viral, I think it's a really best, not best maybe, but good choice, because if you are making emulator from very beginning, OpenStack provide all tools to start.
Yeah, but the downside is when you install Viral on a computer, you need to install the full OpenStack on the computer. It works fine because Viral is running inside, mostly inside. If you want, you make a bare metal install of Viral, but you dedicated your computer to Viral. Otherwise, you run everything inside a virtual machine. But if you have a Linux box where you are making all your networking stuff on this box, you don't necessarily want to install all the OpenStack stuff and also it's we see that Viral actually is making a huge work to migrate from an OpenStack version to another, and the jump from a release seems to be a little complicated.
The solution is beautiful but little complex. So now I think we can move to release 2.0 in more details. Which feature did you add? Which feature can extremely simplify the working principles?
Really, first major feature is the fact that multiple users can be connected to the same project. I think it's really a big deal for learning. Because you can install GNS3 on a central server and have everyone in your company, in your classroom, connected to the same server and see each other work, share configuration, share project. It's a very nice feature, and it's every people who test it think, wow, it's when I look at my old GNS3 and I see with this new feature, it's the future.
Yeah, and how do you manage collisions between different users?
We make all the operation in near real time. You don't have a lot of operations that can really create a collision. If you move a node and someone else move a node, the last movement win. If you try to delete a node and someone try to modify this node at the same time, we just ignore the modification. When you are connected to the same console, you see each other work. If you type a letter, the letter will appear on the other console. If you are two people connected to the same iOS and trying to make modification, it will be hard to work if you don't collaborate and say, okay, it's me working on this console, because you will see each other echo, like if you are connected with a KVM and serial interface of a real router.
Am I right? Two users connected to the same device will see each console, the same console.
Yeah, like a real serial interface on a real router.
Okay, good.
Do I understand correctly? So with this particular feature, when two users can connect to the same running project, and if one of those students, right, just move a node, add a new node, and so on, it will be shown on the screen of another user. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. You can, for example, have your the topology open on your PC at home and your PC at office, and you will see the modification also.
Interesting. Do you also plan to implement the proper multi-user? So what I mean by that is that we have one server, right? And then user connects with, let's say, his credentials, and then another user connects with his credentials, and basically they're working on the same server, but let's say on two completely different projects. So this is a feature that exists right now in UNL, but I think it isn't in GNS3 at this moment.
Yeah, we don't know if we want to implement that. We think it's a requirement. It's a good feature to have. You have multiple problems with that. We don't want user to think we have perfect isolation. I think I didn't test, but I think in UNetLab you can probably escape from a VM on access to another, because you are just, when you are running IOU, you are just running a standard Unix program. You can run any program like that. I think it's better if you want to do that to have correct isolation at the operating system level, but it's not easy to do in order to correctly share the resources between users. But I think when we have the web interface, it should be probably one of the next move to be able to provide a better experience for for classroom with multiple user on a better isolation from one user to another.
What I mean by that is that it happens every so often that some company you have like big UCS server with, I don't know, like 400 gigabytes of RAM, or maybe 1 terabyte of RAM, right? And then it would be very, very cool that, let's say, 10, 20, 30 people can use the same server at the same time working on the stuff that they need.
Yeah, definitely. For the moment, I know the company which are doing that just have human rules to manage that. I think it's more complicated than we think. We have a lot of trap in the past to make it work correctly, and we don't want to start to implement that without being sure we can keep it running in the future.
Okay, so it's currently at this moment it's not on the roadmap, but we may expect it in some future, right?
Yeah, I think you can expect, because multiple people ask for it. We don't have a roadmap with plan for years and years and years. We just focus on today and with the resources we have today, and we don't put that or version on the future. But we are still interested to speak with people about this kind of feature or to receive contribution. I think an university or something like that can probably contribute such feature.
Okay. I also would like to know where GNS3 is going, and what will be your main focus for the next releases.
We try to be the network virtualization platform that you need with all the flexibility you need. We try to be more stable, more easier to use. For example, a feature I didn't speak about 2.0. We have a NAT node. It's a node you can just drop in your topology and bring you an internet connection. It's the kind of feature we want to add. Some stuff simplifying a lot the configuration of GNS3 and making it easier to make topology. Also, when you use this node, if you take it from one computer to another, it will just work. Unlike your cloud interface, which using the network interface of your computer and it's depending of your computer, and it's a big problem for portability. The plan for next release is just continue in the same way, making the server totally accessible via API. All the feature of GNS3 accessible via API, because it's a requirement in order to make a web interface and allow third-party application to work with GNS3. I really think we'll see in the future more application that will connect to your GNS3 server and will help you to make some stuff. You can imagine an application focused just on making beautiful topology with no control of the virtualization.
Another question that I have is that, let's say I want to have some initial configuration for my QEMU devices. Is it possible right now to do in GNS3?
It's possible, but not very easy. The more simple way to do that is just to make you start one time the images, you make your modification, and you take you shut down the VM, you take the disk and use it as a base for your new images. The problem with QEMU is for us, QEMU is just a black box. What is running inside the QEMU, we don't know. We just start a virtual machine. This virtual machine output packet on the network, but we don't know what is happening on the VM. It's probably possible to be able to modify the disk from the outside, but it's not easy because you need to implement correctly all the file system on the virtual machine. And if you take a recent file system like BetterFS, ext4, and stuff like that, you need to make sure when you make a modification to the disk to have the correct checksum for the file system and stuff like that. It's not so easy. And we don't, for the appliance, because it's a black box, we don't have an easy way to push a file inside the appliance. It's kind of problematic, but it's the price to be able to support any appliances.
So there is a current workflow, let's say in Viral, where let's say you created some topology, you did some config changes and so on, and then you stopped working on it, you saved it, and it saves everything in a local JSON Viral file. It saves both configs, right? And then what type of nodes is using. Then if you have another server, so you just still open the JSON file, it gets images of a similar type, it mounts the file system correctly, and then it specifies, okay, I want to boot config from this directory, which is present inside the virtual machine. And so basically there is 100% portability between different servers. So how would this process look like in GNS3, and let's say what kind of limitations? I think you touched on some of those, but I would like to have it, summarized here.
Yeah, the way we are doing that in GNS3, when you export a project, we will export the disk image. QEMU work with a system of overlay. This means you have in your image directory, you have the base images you are using, and all the changes you are making inside your topology as written inside a file into your project. This means if you are using something like a switch OS, which have just two config files written on the disk, the overlay images will be very small. And when you will make the portability, if you reopen it on another computer with the same images, you will be able to reload the config without trouble. The limitation is you will need to have the same images as the base image in order to be able to reload the configuration. Viral has an advantage because they can just modify the images to meet their requirements, and they also have, by default, I think they reserve a management interface on each appliance they run, which allows them to push and pull configuration, and they use a specific management network inside the topology. But because GNS3 is not just about Cisco, just about few appliances, we can't do that because a Brocade appliance, a Cumulus appliance will not work like a Cisco appliance or a Juniper appliance.
Okay, as far as I know, so in order to control in GNS3 like VirtualBox machines or VMware machines, well, I would guess that you use some APIs that are provided by VMware. One of the questions that one of my colleagues asked, is there a planned support for ESXi, so you can have GNS3 there, which will also be able to pull the lists of virtual machines from ESXi server and then control them like start, stop, and so on?
We have no plan for that. Stop the VM is not a problem. It's very easy. What GNS3 is doing, we just use the vmrun program provided by VMware to control VM from command line. The problem with ESXi, to be able to control ESXi, it means we need to create a virtual switch into ESXi, play with the network of VMware, and it's kind like rewriting vSphere. It's not a simple project. For the moment, we don't have plans for that. I admit we are surprised to see so much installation of ESXi. We didn't think about that in the past, but we know that a lot of your users are using ESXi for running GNS3. They just run the GNS3 VM inside. I don't know if one day we'll support it. I can't say. Often it's more easier to start to just put QEMU machine inside your ESXi and let GNS3 control everything. If you really want to connect to another node inside your ESXi installation, you can use the cloud node to access to a network interface, and in your VMware configuration, you make sure that the both VM can speak via this network interface directly.
So I think it's time for last questions, and one of them I want to raise. How about some commercial installations for some enterprises or carriers? Do you have something like this?
In the past, we have a support offer, but we stop it because the support offer we have for paying customer was not better that what we provide already for free. We answer to all questions to user, almost all questions. And today, when an enterprise asks us about some help, some support, generally we just offer it for free. We just help and reply to them to all their questions. I have actually a few discussions with a big company currently deploying GNS3 for a reason or another, and we just provide it for free. We just speak with them, we help them to make their GNS3 installation without trouble, and guide them.
Thank you. And considering questions from users, what is the best way for users and for GNS fans to ask questions about it? About some technical issues, for example, or plans and so on?
The best location is the GNS3 forum. If we really want to, if I really want to discuss directly with the user, I will ask him to send me an email if we want to exchange some private information. We can do that. If you are a developer, if you know exactly what is the bug, you can directly open an issue on GitHub. But the best location is the forum, because on the forum you have the GNS3 developer answering, and you have also all the community, and some people from the community are here since a lot of years and can help user and say, oh, I know this problem, I have seen it 2 years ago, you need to do that.
Thank you. When we will publish our podcast, I will add a link to the forum. And guys and girl, do you have any other questions? Dima?
No, I think I'm good for now. Maybe Natasha has some questions from the audience.
Actually, we had only one question and it was answered already.
Yeah, one question more about Alcatel, but you also answered it. The question is about Alcatel equipment. Do you support it fully now?
I didn't test recently. I think it's work. I don't remember exactly the requirement for Alcatel, if you need to have a pay support or not. I can't say, but I think it's work fine with Alcatel. I know that some Alcatel engineers use GNS3 and test stuff with that, but I don't know if they have published the instruction and stuff on stuff.
Okay, thank you for answer. And Julien, do you have some other words to say about GNS or to Russian community?
Yeah, I wanted to say we are really a kind of, I think, non-profit program. We are focused to make the life of your user better and better. We don't have an evil plan to control the world, and I want really to thank the community for trusting us about that and helping us to advance.
Okay, thank you. I wish the best to GNS. Step by step, you realize features which are demanded by users and reality. And considering SDN support, multi-vendor images, client-server usage mode, we can call GNS convenient and up-to-date application. And also, we're proud to be the place where you presented GNS3 release 2.0.
Thank you a lot.
It was Julien Duponchelle, GNS3 developer from beautiful Paris. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your knowledge to Russian community. And dear listeners, podcast will be published on 25th of March. For those who doesn't speak English, Russian subtitles will be also available. See you next month. Stay tuned.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.